Hey y'all. Today we're going to do all of chapter 3, and it is on the Constitution. So we're going to start off with an ed puzzle. So go ahead and push pause on your video and click on the link for the ed puzzle. Or watch the video and answer the questions. So we're going to start with talking about the 6 basic principles of our Constitution. So let's start with an outline of what the Constitution is. First off, it begins with the preamble, which we listened to the song the other day and learned all about that. And then it is divided into 7 what are called articles. The first 3 articles deal with the branches of government. Article 1 is the legislative branch. Article 2 is the executive. Article 3 is the judicial. Article 4 is the relationship between the states and the national government, also known as federalism. Article 5 is how to amend the Constitution, which we've done 27 times, which I also think is pretty cool that the founders knew that maybe they didn't write the most perfect document and we might need to change it here and there. Article 6 signifies that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And Article 7 is how to ratify the Constitution. So let's start with the basic principles. Principle 1, popular sovereignty. And this means that the people are the source of all governmental power. So go ahead and push pause here and go back to your Google Slides and answer the question directly in the slide. How do people exercise their power? The next principle is limited government. Government may only do those things that the people have given it the power to do. And this really puts a limit on what the government can't overreach. They can't sit there and say, well, on Wednesdays we must wear pink. It also signifies that the government must obey the law. Nobody is above the law. Now this is called constitutionalism or the rule of law. Again, go ahead and go back to your slides and answer the question, what happens when the government doesn't obey the law? Go ahead and click on the link for the crash course. And this is all about the separation of power. And this is that governmental powers are separated into 3 distinct and independent branches of the government. So we have the executive, we have the legislative, we have the judicial, and they're all selected separately by different means, and they each have their own distinct powers. And this kind of falls in line with checks and balances, and that each branch has certain powers with which it can check the operations of the other 2. So your question, again, answer on the slides, is why is it important to have both separation of powers and checks and balances? Now this may look a little convoluted to you, but I want to show you what it's all about. So here we have our 3 branches of government, and you can see that there's arrows going to and from each to each. And what this shows here is that, here's the power. Legislative branch has a power over the judicial branch, that it creates the lower courts, remove judges. The Senate approves or rejects appointments. Now the judicial branch over the legislative branch may declare Congress to be unconstitutional. So each one has their own powers over each other. I would push pause here and go to your Google Slides and just take a moment to check out what the different checks and balances are. The next basic principle is judicial review. And this is the power of the courts to determine if any act of government is constitutional. And it can declare illegal any act of Congress or the president. There have been 150 national cases. I think it's more now. This PowerPoint's a few years old. And more than 1,000 state laws. They tend to really overrule state laws way more than national laws. go ahead and watch this crash course video about judicial review. The next one is federalism. Federalism is a division of power among a central government and several regional governments. In our case, it is the national government and the states. There are certain things that the national government has power to do and certain things that the states have power to do. So your question, and again, answer on the slides, is why do you suppose it was important to the founders to divide power between the states and the national government? Okay, the next section is how to formally amend the Constitution. So go ahead and click on this YouTube link and watch this video. So there is a formal amendment process, and they have two methods for proposal. I want to propose an amendment to the Constitution, and there's two methods for ratification. So it makes a total of 4 ways you can do things. The first method is it is proposed by a 2/3 vote in each House of Congress. So that means 2/3 of the House of Representatives and 2/3 of the senators. And then it's got to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures. So it goes to each state, and each state's legislature, the Florida House and Senate, the Georgia's House and Senate, must also ratify it. And 26 out of our 27 amendments have been done this way. The second method is that it's proposed by Congress and ratified by conventions in 3/4 of the states. And that means each state kind of pulls its top political people and they meet and they ratify it in 3/4 of the states. And only one has been done that way. We're going to kind of skip through the third and fourth ones because they've never been used. But it's proposed by National Convention, Fourth method, again, never been used. So this really leads to the idea of federalism and popular sovereignty. So the amendment process emphasizes federalism because proposals happen at the national level. So, Ms. Strands here in Florida can't say, well, I think that there should be an amendment to the Constitution. It must come from the national level. But the ratification happens at the state's level. So it really kind of shows that we have division of power between the national and the state. Super important concept, remembered. Proposals at the national, ratification at the state. So if a state rejects a proposed amendment, it's not forever bound by that action. If a state accepts an amendment, it is bound by that action. And I always kind of think of it as like if you ask your mom for like $20 and she's like, no. You're like, please? No. Please? No. And you might keep asking. But if your mom hands you the $20, you're like, thank you, and you leave. You don't, you sure you want to give it to me? So it's kind of the same idea. So if the state says no, it can keep going back. But if it says yes, it's a done deal. So over 10,000 amendments have been proposed by Congress. 33 have been sent to the states, and only 25 have been ratified. So your question to answer on your slides is, why do you think so few amendments have been ratified? So let's talk about these 27 amendments. The first 10 are the Bill of Rights, and these guarantee your freedoms. Your freedom of belief, expression, security, equal treatment before the law, no cruel or unusual punishment, yada yada. Now, the later amendments have been added because of particular circumstances. Like things changed in our country, and our leaders realized that something needed to be done. So let's talk about change by other means, because, we've changed a lot since, 1792. So basic legislation. Laws have been passed that spell out provisions. For example, the creation of lower courts. And so our Constitution has certain courts mentioned in it, but we actually have a lot more now. We have, civil courts, family courts, all that kind of stuff. And the way it uses is express powers. These are powers that are spelled out in the Constitution to regulate foreign and interstate commerce. Executive action. This is action taken by the president that does not require legislative approval. So, for example, only Congress can declare war, but a president can send troops. So it's kind of the idea of making war without declaring war. It looks like a war, people die like a war, but it's not officially a war. Iraq, Vietnam, Korea, those are not wars. An executive agreement versus a treaty. An executive agreement is an agreement between two heads of states versus a treaty, which is an agreement between two countries. A treaty must be ratified by the Senate. So your question is, should presidents use their executive action to make great changes? And finally, party practices. There's no mention in the Constitution of political parties. But as we're watching this week, it is the Republican National Party that is nominating President Trump to run again for president. Last week, it was a Democratic Party that nominated Joe Biden to run for president. The Electoral College is another way that really relies heavily on parties. So, what does the Constitution say about parties? I think I just told you. By custom. Now, again, custom is nothing written down. It's just the way things are done. The creation of a cabinet. These are the people that help the president make important decisions. Senatorial courtesy is that if you're nominating somebody from a state, that the senator from that state agrees with that person. And the idea of no third term, although Roosevelt ruined that one, and we have since added it as a constitutional amendment. So there's chapter 3 for you. If you have any questions, hit me up in the chat box, and I hope you have a thrilling Thursday.